The European films of the 60s, those were the most powerful influences on American filmmakers at that time.
French New Wave, the Italian New Wave, films from Japan, which were extraordinary. Films from Russia was still extraordinary.
I was certainly influenced by Bergman and Fellini.
The Fellinis and the Godards and the De Sicas.
I liked De Sica a lot, and I had an opportunity to work with him at one time.
Rossellini and De Sica.
Rossellini first, and then Fellini, Visconti.
Truffaut, Chabrol, Louis Malle.
Truffaut and Romer.
Sotomayor Ray.
Jacques Rivette.
Or Rene, let's say, or Godard.
The major influence on me was Antonioni.
Bertolucci was a big influence on me.
My favorite was Buñuel, actually.
There's Renoir, and then there's everybody else.
I loved Bergman. I loved Kurosawa.
And then also Kurosawa.
Kurosawa?
Kurosawa and the Ozu and some of the other Japanese directors.
The filmmakers that influenced me the most, I don't know their names, because I would go see a film and I hate it, and I'd say, I gotta remember never to do anything like that again.
In the 60s and 70s, every major college campus and the area around on Friday nights was full of kids going to foreign films.
La Dolce Vita, which was big news for the California film campuses. Everyone was talking about La Dolce Vita, and Roman Polanski, who was a film student in Poland, had made Knife in the Water, greatly admired.
Using handheld, the way they were using grainy black and white, the way they were expressing things, the little stories, the human events, they were all very moving to me.
We were tremendously conscious that these people like Fellini and Godard and Antonioni and others were working in a different way of storytelling that we were.
Breaking out of the seamless style of the classical cinema of Hollywood, which we all loved, but was a part of, seemed to be a part of another world, in a way. And this world was new and open, and anything was possible.
One thing that Godard said, which really affected me, he said, you know, you can, the way you can beat the studio system is by locking them inside their studios and going out and shooting in the street, because the whole world's a soundstage, and they're pretending it's all inside their building.
Truffaut's fluid camera was an extraordinary experience, and the handheld sort of quality, the rough quality. I mean, I realized that you could do almost anything if your heart and your spirit was in the right place for the movie that you were making.
These were new forms. This was a new way of storytelling. The concepts and the execution were highly original. Now, they may have had their roots in American filmmaking of another period, but it was not disguised so much as transformed.
I was influenced by the European filmmakers' affection for American films. Their point was that in the studio system, despite the factory-like nature of the business, there were those filmmakers whose personality transcended all events, and whose personality you could feel in the work, no matter who wrote it, no matter who produced it, or in fact, no matter who was in it. You know, Hawks's movies are very personal to him and reflected very much his particular code of behavior, his code of honor, his philosophy of life, his attitude toward men and women. And yet, it was always done within the framework of a story and a movie that, you know, that you didn't have to be initiated into to follow.
I believe that Cahiers de Cinema was certainly a major influence in my learning to respect American films. I fell in love with John Ford, and as you may or may not know, he made over 130 movies. He made me understand the importance of ritual. I had never really understood the world that I grew up in until I saw John Ford's films about the cavalry.
When the French decided to discover us, in my view, they discovered our crap. They didn't discover our great movies. I've never read a serious Cahiers de Cinema piece on Willie Wyler or Billy Wilder. Each of them had the highest level of work of almost any director I can think of. The sheer quality, one after another, after another, after another. The work of American directors over the years has been Absolutely. It's movies.
Everything is linked in these discussions, so you then have to go back to the golden age of television, which had happened in the late 40s, early 50s, out of which John Frankenheimer and Lumet and Arthur Penn. And so the generation of the 70s, as always, was standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, John Frankenheimer was a giant. I mean, his work that he did as a 26-year-old, live television, which was a more cinema-style live television, that was amazing work that will stand forever as great cinema. And it was done live. It was one day, one shot, you know, figure it out. How did they do it even? Arthur Penn was a theater director. He was very admired, and I mean, for myself as a theater student, really looked up to Arthur Penn and was very impressed with even the earlier films he had made.
When I had first read the Benton and Newman script, they had been influenced by Seeing Jules and Jim, by French cinema, who in turn had been influenced by its love of old American gangster movies, and the two reached a sort of confluence with Bonnie and Clyde. Suddenly it was possible to conceive of sexual scenes and suggestions of sexual behavior that had never been permitted before.
It's hard to understand, if you hadn't lived before that time, what a major impact that freedom of a point of view did to people's brains. You say, wait a minute, then there are no rules here.
Wait a minute! What the hell are we talking about? Who cares? Yeah, so for a minute or two, we're not stupid, we're having a good time. Who does it hurt? I mean, who makes up the rules anyway? I mean, always play it cool, always put everybody down. Standing around in the corner looking the other side of your eye, see if anybody's looking at you. Listen, hell, fellas, I'm 28.
Independent film, when I started, was typified by the films of someone like John Cassavetes, who went out with his acting buddies and his wife, and they all took no salaries and made John Cassavetes movies.
Faces, John Cassavetes' Faces, was a tremendous art house hit. Got nominations and everything, and it was a big surprise for everybody because it was a grainy 16mm movie blown up, and that was a very personal movie, and I think that was the beginning of what a lot of people interpreted as the new Hollywood.
Cassavetes was a great influence, and also made, when I saw Shadows, that's when I realized you can maybe actually go off and do a film, meaning that you don't have to have the trappings of the studio.
Cassavetes was wonderful to watch. I never worked for him, but I saw him shoot a few times, and he would give anybody the camera. You know, if you, well, you don't like the shot, well, you shoot it. Suddenly there'd be a guy who never had a camera in his hand before, and he liked that. He liked the freshness of it.
As far as a technical director, I'm a very difficult director, because I have no truck with anyone that doesn't watch the scene. I have no regard for anyone that isn't with it, and it isn't trying to make it the best that they can. Now, as far as their eye is concerned, I want them to be as creative with their own eye, not with my eye.
Cassavetes was after photographing inner emotions. That was his quest. It was not at that time the quest of mainstream filmmakers.
He was doing absolutely everything that he'd been doing forever and that everyone else suddenly started to do. And in the 70s, he made his wonderful film, A Woman Under the Influence.
Hey, Tom!
There was a tremendous, just like the rays of the sun in a magnifying glass, it was starting to focus on this group of younger people, fueled partly by people like Roger Corman and AIP, who, for their own profit motives, would say, hey, go make a movie, I'll give you $20,000, you go and make it and give you a chance. And certainly I became Roger's assistant quite early, and so I started to pick up some real low-budget production savvy, which is like, how do you make a movie when you hardly have any money